that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey, me, and the famous Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh, philanthropist, world traveler, and expert on energy. How do you like that? How could that all get rolled into one? Every day I get up early and I do a search of news to find everything that I can in the news from energy and climate change. And as I'm doing this, I'm just checking to make sure that my microphone is working. I put together a set of references to online articles, a synopsis of about 50 words for each, and then a link to the original. And those are put on my blog, geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. And those are put together in by numbers of 10 to 15, and then they go up. And you can visit. We will try to keep you apprised of what we're talking about, because we pick 20 from the blog each week to talk about.
Some of them are really quite comprehensive and detailed,
and some of them are
we
fun.
Don't have we could spend the whole show sometimes on just one of them.
Actually, that ship.
Yeah.
This Sion Moxie, we could spend a whole show just
get
talking.
Everybody's interest raised about the ship.
Just talking about the design of that thing. I looked at that and I said, "That's a ship," but it is.
You'll soon find out.
You'll soon find out, right? And so we talk about these things. We'll try to keep you apprised of the date at the blog. And when you go to the blog, you can click on the calendar that's there to get back to the date of the thing that we're listing. So I suppose we should start with an announcement that I promised Hannah Huber I would give, which is that on September 12th, which is Tuesday, at 6 to 8 p.m. at 118 Elliott, that is both the name of the building and the address in Brattleboro, there's going to be a meeting with panelists who will discuss, I'll just read this. Panelists will frame the current context of climate. Part of the problem with getting old is that when you put your glasses on, you don't see as well. Panelists will frame the current context of climate inaction or action in Vermont and outline policy responses they're working on to advance and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, grow our economy, and ensure that all Vermonters benefit from the transition off fossil fuels. Attend the events to offer input, ask questions, and find out meaningful ways to engage. This is being put on by VBSR and VNRC.
Whoever they are.
Hannah Huber is with VNRC. And it includes, a bunch of people who are local to Vermont and knowledgeable representatives in the government and so forth.
About climate.
People who have some significant connections with climate action and so forth. So that again is September 12th, which is Tuesday, at 6 to 8 p.m. at 118 Elliott.
That's sort of diagonally opposite the firehouse.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. It's a single-story building, or at least it appears to be from the front.
Used to be a laundromat.
It used to be a laundromat. Yeah, absolutely. It can't be a laundromat anymore because when it was sold, the people who owned the laundromat wrote into the deed that it couldn't be a laundromat.
Oh, okay.
Well, they didn't want the competition. They've got other laundromats. Anyway, that's an opportunity for anybody who wants to take it. And I suppose we should get on to the daily events.
Yeah, might as well. I think this recent flood down in Houston has awakened a lot of people's awareness that something's happening to the climate.
We've had in terms of dollar damage, Hurricane Harvey is, I've heard it said that it was as bad as Katrina and Sandy put together. And but certainly it was as bad as it's the worst we've ever had. Probably 50% worse than Katrina, at least in terms of the dollar damage.
Well, we haven't heard the end of it.
No, we have
they're
not.
They're still there with their heading machines.
And then this is followed in literally days by Hurricane Irma, which is scheduled now, and of course for some people watching this, they will already know the outcome of this, to hit the east coast of Florida and go straight up the coast. City after city on that east coast is going to get hit by this thing. You can bet your bottom dollar they aren't going to be sending off any satellites from the Cape Kennedy during that event.
I don't think so. So it's quite possible we might get the end of this.
I don't know.
Well, nobody knows right now.
Nobody knows. I mean, Sandy kind of avoided Vermont by turning west after it hit land, which is just bizarre.
Yeah.
But you know, all of these things, Hurricane Harvey just kind of hung out there and made a mess out of things.
Just rained and rained.
Just
and
rained. Okay, our first item here is from Thursday, August 31st, which is a week ago today being the 7th of September as we're recording this. And this is from the BBC.
It's talking about the Houston flood.
It sure is.
More fires expected at stricken Arkema plant, or Arkema, I don't know how it's pronounced.
A chemical plant near the flooded city of Houston is expected to explode and catch fire in coming days, which, by the way, it has done. 40 inches of rainfall in the area flooded the site, cutting off power, and backup generators also got flooded. This almost sounds like the meltdowns at Fukushima Daiichi, you know, where the backup.
Well, it's analogous. It's slightly different. But,
well, this is a small plant.
They had to keep their chemicals cold.
Yep.
And without any power, they couldn't do that.
Yep.
So now they're having fireworks.
They were manufacturing. They were specialty chemicals. They were special. The plant specializes in the manufacture of peroxides.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know what formic acid is?
From ants?
There you go. Formic acid is named formic acid because it's the distinctive smell and produces a sting that you get when an ant bites you. So it's called formic acid, which means antacid, and it's, you know, a friend of mine who is a chemist said it's the only acid that's antacid. Well, the peroxide of formic acid is called performic acid.
Right.
And it performs.
Okay.
Not very stable. Should we move away from that horrible
Well,
entry?
this is from the article, but
Yeah.
it's basically going to echo what you just said. Harvey was the most powerful hurricane to hit Texas in more than 50 years.
Actually, I think it's, yeah.
That's what this article says.
Yeah. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, again, we're still talking about Harvey.
Yeah, we are.
Flood insurance.
Yes.
Harvey tests a broken system.
Harvey and now Irma is going to double that test.
Yeah.
This is from CNN. The flooding in the Houston area caused by Hurricane Harvey, which, by the way, is no relation to me, is just the latest problem for the troubled National Flood Insurance Program after a series of major storms caused floods in the last 12 years, including Hurricane Katrina in 2005, Superstorm Sandy in 2012, and the federally funded program is roughly $25 billion in debt.
There's a couple of interesting things about this. For one thing, this program is the only flood protection that most people can get.
Yeah.
You can't go to your local insurance broker and say, I want to buy flood insurance. He don't have it.
Yeah.
You know, big corporations can get stuff like that, but often what they get doesn't include water damage. Duh.
Yes.
Flood insurance without water damage, right? It's about.
It reminds me of
stuff.
really cheap life insurance that I was offered once, where if you read the fine print, it says this insurance will not pay if you die from any of the following causes.
Yeah. It's about everything.
War, any medical problem that's related to a disease or a chronic or circumstance, and it just goes on and on and on. And
But they cover you if you get hit by a meteorite.
They might.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, they might not, because that's an act of God, which is
Well,
what
the
can
bottom
I say?
line on this article is that the program's kind of broke now,
Yes.
and they're expecting a huge number of claims,
A huge
and
number.
they don't know
of claims.
where the money's going to come
They
from.
don't know where the money is coming from, and with Irma coming on behind this, they're going to have an unbelievable amount of money that they're going to be
absolutely.
scheduled to pay out. So should we move on?
Yeah, let's move along. We got a picture.
We have a
coming up
picture here. This is flooding in Houston. We keep talking. We're going to be talking about
We'll
Houston
see
a lot.
couple of pictures of
This is from the
Houston's
Washington
flooding.
Examiner.
Blame Harvey's torrential rain, not development, for massive flooding, planning experts say.
Right.
I'm not sure I agree with that 100%. I think it's a little bit of both.
It says Houston's relaxed approach to development should not be blamed for Hurricane Harvey's destruction, as critics are saying, but rather the unprecedented nature of a storm that dumped as much as 50 inches of rain on the city, say planning experts and engineers. Nevertheless, it was the third 500-year flood in 3 years in Harris County, which is where Houston.
It's supposed to work that way.
It's not supposed to work that way. And one of the things I saw in the news today is that over 50% of the badly flooded areas that were not in flood zones at all. They weren't even in the 500-year flood zones.
So they couldn't even get flood insurance.
You can get flood insurance if there's no possibility for your house to flood. That's easy. Yeah. It's like, I don't know.
A little bit of the background here. Houston is low-lying, very flat, and sits on a layer of soil rich in clay, which are natural factors that limit drainage.
Yeah.
And their regulatory environment has created problems that are part, but not all, of Houston's damage story.
One of the problems.
Basically said if you want to build it, you can.
Yeah.
And now they're going to make you look at it.
Yeah. One of the problems that they've had is that people were building houses in areas that the Army Corps of Engineers wanted to use as reservoirs for holding water in case of hurricane-related floods.
What just happened?
Yeah. So, what we've got here, and of course, what's happening here is you've got a bunch of people in Congress who are saying, no, this is not because of climate change. It's because of unregulated expansion. These people are the same people who are saying they don't want regulations.
Yeah.
So, the bankrupt approach that they have to the legislation is coming apart at the seams.
Well, I
think.
used to live in Wardsboro, and when I lived there, we had no zoning, and B, every time it came up to get voted on, it went down. The people in Wardsboro did not want zoning.
Yeah.
If I want to build it, let me build it.
I want to build it.
So it happened that this one guy built himself a nice little pond on the side of a hill.
Okay, we should move on. Our next piece
Friday,
is
September the 1st.
I was going to say that. And we have a picture here. Actually, we have two pictures of this. This is the ship we were talking about earlier.
This is very interesting.
It comes from Renews.
That ship is called the CM Moxie.
CM Moxie.
And of course, the headline is CM Moxie clocks on at high wind.
CM Offshore Contractors Installation Support Vessel CM Moxie has started work on Statoil's 30-megawatt high-wind floating wind farm off Scotland. This is significant because it's the first
It's a floating wind farm.
Yeah.
So that pole you see sticking up there is floating.
Yeah.
It's not anchored to the...
It's not anchored.
It's moving back
It is
and
actually
forth.
anchored. It's not...
It's anchored, but it's not stuck in the
fixed.
ground. Yeah.
It's going to bob up and down with the waves.
And then there's the boat bobbing up and down.
Yes.
And you'll see on the superstructure of that ship, there's something that looks like a bridge.
Yep.
It is a bridge.
It is a bridge. It's a gangway.
It's a gangway.
And
it is structured so that it moves with the boat.
and one of the reasons that thing looks like it's so big vertically is because it has to be tall enough that people are not going to get pitched off of it easily. So anyway, the vessel arrived at Buchan Deep site last week, and it is supporting ongoing commissioning work in the project's 5 Siemens 6-megawatt turbines, which are mounted on soar buoy floating foundations. And we do. I was dissatisfied with this picture, which came with the article, because you can't see the whole ship. And actually,
well, the first one is working.
It's in operation.
It's in operation.
The next, I've got another picture here, and I'm just going to switch to it.
Pull it up.
This picture came from the port of Hamburg, and it's the same ship coming out of port. And if you compare these two pictures closely, it's kind of hard to figure out certain things, because the ship has a crane on it, which is really obvious in this picture.
But
the crane
disappears,
yeah, and the crane is between that bridge we were talking about,
yep,
and the mast of this wind turbine. And here you can't see the crane at all. And part of the reason is because that bridge that we were talking about has that blue structure on the right side, which, by the way, you can see a staircase there, and the railing on the staircase. It gives you an idea of how tall, how big that thing is. The crane is on the other side of the ship, and it is concealed by this stuff. But this is an interesting vessel. The back of that, by the way, is like a pickup truck. Yeah, it's got
place for storage of.
You can put containers from container ships into that.
Wow.
And the crane can pick up the container and put it on the top of something if that's what they want to do. So it's an interesting ship. It's a one of a kind thing. There are similar looking.
It's a hotel to boot.
Yeah. I think my recollection is that it has a crew of 60. So
all of whom live on the ship.
All of whom live on the ship while it's at sea. And I have no idea how seaworthy these things are. You know, when I see these ships, sometimes I think they must just scoot to harbor as soon as any kind of bad weather comes around. But I don't know. Maybe it's very seaworthy. Anyway, it's an interesting vessel.
It is very interesting. I was fascinated by it. Well, let's move on.
Well, let's move on, and maybe
to the week that the Earth stood still.
Yeah, and you should probably get us up on there instead of the ship. This is from the New York Times, and it says, when normally sober scientists start draining the barrel of awful superlatives to describe a summer day off the Gulf Coast, it's time to pay attention. And today, the smartest military men count the global insecurity and chaos of climate change as an existential threat on par with nuclear disaster. And this is absolutely true. We've had military people going to Congress for year after year after year
and they're saying this is a threat.
Climate change is a serious threat. And, you know, it's like the people in Congress of a certain type of persuasion. And I don't want to say that they're Republicans, because there are Republicans who take this seriously and are in agreement on it. But you know, what's happened here is a small group of people donated money year after year after year to certain causes that are related to the conservative movement in the United States, and built trust. And they parlayed that trust into a takeover of the conservative wing of the Republican Party, which they leveraged into a takeover of the party, and then leveraged that into a takeover of the federal government.
It kind of seems that way.
It seems that way, but if you think about that for just a minute, you realize that that's a lot of leverage going on. And when you've got too much leverage going on, the whole thing can disappear like that. Something can give. Yeah. Absolutely. Anyway, that's the New York Times thing. So, got more to say on that?
Yeah. Our flood isn't the only flood in the world that's happening right now.
No, it isn't.
More than 1,000 people have died thus far in catastrophic flooding in South Asia.
Right.
With rain volumes 10 times the usual monsoon.
10 times. 10 times. And then on top of this, Hurricane Harvey hits, and within days after the most expensive hurricane ever to hit the United States, we get what has been called by a few people the most powerful hurricane in Irma ever to be in the Atlantic Ocean. This is, it's called climate change, guys. Climate change, and you know, one of the things that I've been reading about in the last week is that the climatologists are saying we're not getting more hurricanes, and the models don't show us getting more hurricanes, but what we are getting is more powerful hurricanes.
They're fiercer.
They're fiercer, and a greater percentage of their hurricanes have great power. And the science behind this is simple physics. Warm water evaporates more easily. Warm air holds more water. When you got more water in the atmosphere, you can have more rain. It's just that simple.
That's pretty simple, isn't it?
It's pretty simple.
And it's basic. I mean, I've read that same stuff.
It's basic. And if you want to find out about climate change, well, measure the temperature of the water year after year after year. Measure the average temperature of the atmosphere year after year after year, and you can see simple trajectory there. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's affected the most is the temperature of the coldest night of the winter, and the average coldest night of the winter temperature here in Vermont has gone up 10 degrees in the last 35 years.
Hence things like ticks.
Which means we've got Lyme disease that we never had before, and babesiosis. Have you ever heard of that? Ooh. Babesiosis.
Never heard of it.
It's carried by the same ticks, and it mimics malaria pretty effectively, including the fact that it's chronic.
Oh boy.
And so it recurs. And then we've got Eastern equine encephalitis and West Nile virus, which we didn't have in Vermont 35 years ago. And we've got, the mountains, the deciduous trees on the mountains are moving higher and higher because they can outcompete the conifers at higher, coldest winter temperatures, and the maple forests are not producing as much sugar, and the ski industry is suffering, and Vermont is turning into
Georgia.
Yeah. So there you go.
Time to start a peach farm in Vermont, isn't it?
Well, I planted a peach.
Yeah, there are some cold weather peaches, I guess.
Well, no, this is not a cold weather peach.
And it's able to plant peaches.
Yeah, and
ordinary Georgia.
And as a matter of fact, we've got one peach growing on the property where I live, which obviously came from somebody tossing a pit out at the window of his car or something.
Probably,
because it's a volunteer peach.
Yeah,
and it's bearing fruit. So anyway, we should move on.
You might thank a squirrel for that one.
Might thank a squirrel. That's right. They love peaches. They do. Okay.
Well, let's take another look at the flood damage.
Yep. This is from the BBC.
Let's see if I can pull it up. I think I can. White House seeks disaster aid from Congress.
Yeah, right. The White House says it will ask Congress for emergency funding to help those affected by Hurricane Harvey. President Trump is expected to propose an initial $5.9 billion. The amount will be followed by other aid, but it's not known how quickly. Texas authorities say the state might need $125 billion. That figure has since gone up to $180 billion. Yeah. Donald Trump has decided that he should contribute $1 million of his own money.
He said he's going to donate $1 million of his own money. Good for him.
Good for him. But the head of FEMA said, don't hold your breath on the federal government bailing you out, guys.
Well, they're running out of money.
Not only are they running out of money, but they can't
get more.
They've got this idea. Yeah, well, they can't get more because the Congress is saying we don't want to spend any money.
Yeah.
So we want to take a position of no helping hand. That should be the motto of Congress. No helping hand.
Yep.
Anyway, and I've been seeing stuff. Did you see that thing about DACA, the Dreamers?
I haven't caught up on that.
Well, what they're talking about doing is ending the Obama era thing that says if a child was brought up in this country and he just doesn't know any other place, we're not going to toss him out of the country.
So you're talking about kids who came up with people who crossed the border illegally.
That's right. And
they're sitting
they're
here,
Americans.
Going to American schools, playing American games, speaking American English.
Being American heroes in things
war.
Like in wars and in response to disasters like Hurricane Harvey. There was a guy who was a disaster responder in Hurricane Harvey, and this Donald Trump's decision to abandon DACA It says, and by the way, thank you very much for your activity, but we're going to kick you out of the country.
So we're sending these people back to Central America.
Right.
They don't even speak Spanish.
Now, Donald Trump is saying, if Congress doesn't make that into a permanent law, I'm going to revisit this.
Oh, boy.
And so we've got some kind of fundamental shift going on in Washington. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. I'm thinking maybe Donald Trump will say, somebody was lying to me about climate change, but we'll see what happens. Okay, we're up to Saturday, September 2nd, I believe. Is that correct? Yes.
It is correct.
And for the first time and several times that I've said things like that, I was right. And this is an item from Clean Technica.
Vehicles and the grid. It talks about progressive policies in California and New York.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk foresees the market for Model 3 vehicles swelling to 700,000 vehicles as EVs become more common. However, having EVs selling in these larger volumes could have some unintended side effects. For starters, a sudden large-scale surge in electric vehicle charging will have on as an impact on our electricity grid.
It's an interesting article about just 2 states, but they are being proactive here. I've got a list of things, but I don't think I'm going to mention them.
Okay.
It's going to take too long.
I saw in the news today, and we will talk about it next week, the French are going to pass a law saying they will not provide, they are phasing out all use of hydrocarbons. They're not going to allow any exploration or development of hydrocarbon resources in France or its territories.
That's pretty extreme.
Yeah, and I think that is as of 2040, which is 23 years from now. But they're stopping the use of fossil fuel driven cars, and that is by 2040. So but they're not even going to sell oil.
The times they are changing.
Times are changing. Now we have something coming up from PV Magazine USA. And we have a picture here.
Do we have a picture?
We do.
We do have a picture.
Yeah.
Let's get the picture up.
This is what's called Pomp and Circumstance. It's the EPA headquarters in Washington, D.C.
Worth more than gold. Solar helps vault Washington, D.C. to LEED platinum status.
Washington, D.C. has become the world's first LEED platinum city. It is in part because of what has been done installing solar energy on its municipal buildings. In the past 2 years, solar power installed on the roofs of 28 public schools, other educational buildings, police stations, fire facilities now produce as much as 7 megawatts of solar power.
So these are all municipal things.
They're all municipal things. It's the city government they're calling LEED Platinum, not the whole city. It would be nice if it were the whole city, but it's the city government of Washington, D.C., which, by the way, has its own government separate from Congress, which is operating D.C. as a whole. And so the city is pretty kind of radical in some ways that Congress is not. So, next item.
Let's move along.
Chicago Tribune presented us with this little bit of information.
Solar farms are cropping up in a farming county.
Empowered by Illinois' new Future Energy Jobs Act, solar companies have approached farmers around Will County about using some of their property for solar farms. Will County is just south of Chicago. With offers of $800 per acre compared to the $160 to $180 per acre for a really good crop yield. Some older farmers are considering the steady cash flow as they head into retirement.
A quick takeaway, they are learning that the sun they now rely on to produce vegetables could be harnessed into a new cash crop.
Yep.
And it's quite helpful.
And we will see an article come up about the combination of solar power and cash crop.
Stay tuned, folks.
Yeah, stay tuned, folks. We are up to Sunday, September 3rd, and we've got a picture from the Deseret News in Utah. Let's see what's going on there. There you go. Yeah.
It is an interesting article. Is Utah missing the renewable energy boat?
Rocky Mountain Power intends to invest $3.5 billion for renewable energy infrastructure to supply power for Utah. The bad news for Utah is that the money will be spent in Wyoming and Idaho. So the question for elected leaders and legislators from Utah's more rural counties is, why?
Well, I read the article,
Yeah.
and I read it again,
Yeah.
and I didn't find out why.
No, there is no explanation for this.
Utah will receive little benefit, yet we still pay for the transmission lines to bring it here.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, so
Why are they doing this? It doesn't make any sense to put all that stuff in Idaho and Wyoming. They could put it in Utah. Utah is a big state. It's got lots of resources. It doesn't have a huge population. And you could provide for that population out of resources that are not going to bother anybody.
I bet you there's a hidden story behind all
Well,
this
I think there's a hidden legislative story.
Yeah.
But should we go on?
Yeah, let's move on.
We're going to Nigeria with a story from today.ng.
Nigeria spends $14 billion yearly on off-grid diesel power generation.
Well, how is this possible? Aside from the massive recurrent national and grid investments in Nigeria, with costs running into several billion US dollars, the country will be spending N5 trillion. I don't know what the N stands for here, but it's $14 billion each year on distributed diesel generation, which has no connection to the national utility grid but provides electricity for homes and businesses.
That doesn't make sense. To me, it doesn't.
It does make sense when you consider that Nigeria is a big oil producer, and they probably are subsidizing the use of oil in people's homes. And what they haven't figured out...
So you're saying that diesel fuel's cheap in
Diesel
Nigeria.
fuel is, I'll bet it's very cheap.
That makes a certain amount of sense.
Look at what happened in Venezuela. I mean, they were selling gasoline for 7 cents a gallon. And then all of a sudden, they couldn't do that anymore because they didn't have a place to sell it, aside from locally. And they were losing money on local sales. So they raised the price of gasoline, and people were very upset. So...
well, this diesel generation is supposed to offset some of the traditional biomass that people are burning in their homes.
Yeah, right.
So it's a step in the right direction, but it would seem to me that the obvious step they should be doing is renewables.
Is absolutely solar and batteries, absolutely, and you can put those up anywhere. And as we've been seeing, that happens in Africa over and over and over again. They have women coming in, Maasai women coming into areas in East Africa.
Solar panels on a donkey.
That's right. Bringing them in on a donkey and setting them up.
Thatched roof with solar panels
That's
on
right.
top. I mean, this is really happening.
It really is.
Very
Okay,
interesting.
Our next item is from the Billings Gazette.
Aha.
Here we go.
And here we go. This is in Montana.
Yep.
Montana coal mine production up 2 million tons. Goes against a lot of what we've been saying.
Yeah, well, Montana coal production is up by more than 2 million tons ahead of where it was this time last year. Although analysts say the future is far from bright for fossil fuels. This is a quote: "A company that lost 30% of its market in the last couple of years and gains back 2 points is technically doing better," one analyst said, but of course that doesn't mean a lot. And the new plants are just not being built. There are no, as far as I can determine, no coal burning plants being built in the United States. Mm-hmm. So where are they going to get, if they increase coal production, where is it going to go?
It's got to go to export.
It's got to go to export, but the Chinese aren't buying it.
No.
And the Indians aren't buying it. And certainly the UK isn't buying it. They've got no, they've only got 2% of their electricity in the first half of this year from coal. So the future for coal is bleak.
Well, that's what this article is basically saying.
Yeah.
One little uptick doesn't mean it's over.
No, and we're going to see downticks coming along because we're still having coal plants shutting down. So should we move on
back to Hurricane Harvey?
To Monday, September 4th, and we've got an item from the BBC here.
Texas governor warns bill could be $180 billion.
Well, this is what we mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott said the bill for reconstruction after Hurricane Harvey could be as high as $180 billion, which since this is from the BBC, just for anybody watching this show from some foreign country, it's 138 billion pounds. The damage caused by Hurricane Katrina was about 120 billion compared to Harvey's 180. The head of FEMA, the government's disaster management agency, warned that flood-hit states should not rely on Washington to pay the bill.
That's part of what this article is about.
Yeah.
The White House has warned that the U.S. debt ceiling, the cap on government spending, will need to be raised to meet the bill for recovery. And only Congress can raise that limit.
Well, Donald Trump has been dealing with the Democrats to get that done.
Huh?
Which, he started doing that after, I think after the maps started showing Hurricane Irma coming up the coast of Florida, where he's got a whole bunch of properties.
And it's dangerously close to the sea, isn't it?
Oh, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. That's the worst path that could happen, and the number of people who can be hurt by that is just outrageous.
Yeah.
How do you evacuate from? I mean,
it can't be done.
If a hurricane hits the east coast of Florida, the west coast of Florida is still going to be in a terrible storm, and it's going up the whole east coast of the state.
Well, that seems to be the most likely path.
Well, at this point, they're going to be getting bad storms in Florida. I don't see how that can be avoided, but we'll see what happens. It could be very bad. It could be worse. Or it could be, these hurricanes are unpredictable. It could turn east. Okay.
Well, we got a nice picture coming up.
Yeah, this is from Clean Technica.
This is pretty cool. I like this.
This is a Rauch and Lang electric car. Rauch is German word for smoke.
Oh, is it? Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
It's an interesting car because it's got an engine compartment, but no grill.
But no grill, that's right. And I think that engine compartment probably has batteries in it.
Well, there's got to be batteries in that car somewhere.
Somewhere. What's the title?
End of fossil fuel cars.
Yeah.
This is a very comprehensive article.
It is really interesting.
If you got about a week, go read it.
This is on September 4th, so you can go to geoharvey.com, click on September 4th, and you'll see that car. The picture is there.
Yeah. End of fossil fuel cars.
The current growth rate of EVs looks to be higher than 42%, and that gives the doubling time of 2 years. If you have a 42% growth rate, it'll double every 2 years, and they're saying this is higher than that. Double. If it can maintain that 42% growth rate, EV sales will take the entire market by 2031, even without such revolutionary changes as driverless cars and ubiquitous ride sharing that some analysts predict. And, I've been looking into a thing called Wright's Law, and
Whose?
Wright's Law. It's
like
an economic.
Brothers?
Yeah. It's a law that was formulated in the 1930s, but it was not really tested until the 1980s, 90s, and so forth. And it is unlike Moore's Law, which pertains to the growth of the power of computer things. Moore's Law isn't a law. It's just a kind of this is what happened.
But it seems to be happening.
Yeah. Wright's Law actually explains it and talks about mathematically what it is. So it is a law that's been tested, it explains the fact that there is exponential growth in some of these industries. But I think Wright's Law can also be applied to industries that are in decline. And if that's the case, then as EVs take over larger and larger shares of the marketplace, the cost of gasoline will go up rather than down with changes in demand. As demand goes down, the price will go up. You got to pay for the infrastructure.
Be there anyhow.
That's right. And so it's going to become less and less efficient to make gasoline or home heating oil or propane or any of those things. And that means that the prices could go through the roof even though the demand is soft.
Well, one of the things they're not talking much about with electric cars is how trouble-free they are.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, no spark plugs, no oil
I
changes.
asked Jason Cooper. You know, Jason Cooper has a Tesla, and he's well known in Brattleboro. And I took a ride in his Tesla, and I said to him, maintenance. And he said, well, I do have to replace the windshield wipers every once in a while.
Windshield wipers and tires, that's about it.
Tires and windshield wipers is pretty much, you know, those are the big items. Tires are the big, okay.
This article raises two questions.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is the electric vehicle revolution on track to take over from fossil fuel vehicles in the coming decades?
Right.
And the answer is very likely.
Very likely.
Okay, and the second question, if yes, will the revolution happen fast enough to be consistent with the Paris 2°C warming cap and net zero emissions? Not too long after 2050. And they don't know yet.
Well,
we're looking at that one.
I have reasons why I would say it's going to be much faster than what's needed in terms of replacing cars. It's going to be very fast.
You mean once it's happening, it's going to be a stampede?
It's going to be a stampede.
Yeah, it could very well be.
And the only people who get hurt by that are the few people out there who are stuck with gas-driven cars that they can't afford to replace. Mm-hmm. Poor people. Mm-hmm. Okay, we have an item from the press.
This is a very interesting article.
Really interesting.
And it's important, really. We've talked about this kind of thing before.
Yep.
Bionic leaf might power Earth.
The artificial leaf is smaller than a playing card and as thin as a real leaf. At its core is a wafer of silicon used in standard solar panels. It is sandwiched between two coats of chemical catalysts. The silicon's job is to absorb sunlight and pass the energy to the catalysts, and the catalysts use this to make hydrogen and oxygen from water.
So what they basically saying, this bionic leaf can produce fuel.
Fuel, absolutely.
Lots of fuel.
Lots of fuel.
And of course, it goes without saying, if you can produce fuel, you can produce plastics too.
Well, you can do all kinds of things. With this hydrogen gives you an ability to do things that are, there's a lot. Of course, there's no carbon in this.
You can't store the hydrogen.
You can store it for a short period of time.
But what they're doing here is they're running the hydrogen through a fuel cell.
Yeah.
And storing the electricity.
Right.
Bingo.
We got to move on, Tom. We're up to Tuesday, September 5th, and we've got item here from the Nikkei Asian Review.
Yeah, we talked
about
That's a boring
picture, but it's kind of cool.
Well, what we're looking at there in the picture is solar panels obviously on top of what's down there in the bottom.
What do you got for a title on this?
Can mushrooms and solar power fill Japan's vacant farmland?
Yeah, you just tipped the hand. Farmers in Japan could be in for a windfall if new practice of combining agriculture with solar power generation takes root. In 2013, the Japanese government relaxed some restrictions on the use of farmland for solar power generation, providing it was also used for agriculture. Now, some farmers grow mushrooms under the solar panels. And by the way, according to Paul Stamets, who is kind of, in my opinion, the expert on mushrooms, you know, he wrote a really good book called Mycelium Running.
I've heard that name.
Mushrooms really are better if they get a certain amount of sunshine.
I guess it depends on the species. Well,
it might, but the button mushroom that's sold in the store produces vitamin D from the sunshine in large quantities. Yeah. So it's good to have those mushrooms exposed to sunshine. They don't need dark. They do function fairly well here in these. These are vertical mushroom farms. It's kind of interesting.
Well, these particular mushrooms are cloud ear mushrooms, which you'll see in a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not going to find them in a supermarket yet, but...
You might find them at the co-op. The Brattleboro Co-op has got a lot of unusual things in it. Okay, our next item is from WBUR. Maine
Public Radio.
Yeah.
Giant batteries help renewable energy grow in New England.
Giant batteries are starting to make a mark in the electricity grid that serves all of New England. Their unique characteristics could supercharge solar and wind energy development in the region. The batteries reduce stress on the power grid, and at the same time, they reduce customer bills through a process called peak shaving.
Yep.
You
I'm
got
not going to touch that one.
You're not, well, peak shaving is interesting because the peak power demand is when the spot price for electrical power is highest. But the cost of wholesale power that they pay
for peak power,
for any
very
power,
high.
for the whole thing,
Yeah.
depends upon the maximum peak load they have achieved during the course of, this is for the transmission of power,
Okay.
maximum price of power they've achieved during a peak time during the course of a year. So if they can shave just a little bit off that peak power,
They
the
save a
highest,
lot of money.
they save a lot of money. So that's one of the reasons that, you know, Green Mountain Power, for example, is selling Tesla batteries, including installation, for $1,500, which is about less than a quarter of what it would cost if you bought them and installed them. And they're doing that provided that you will let them take electricity out of the power when they need it to address peak
they're
demand.
building their own reserves.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
Okay.
A little takeaway here.
Yeah.
They're talking about giant batteries, and they talk about this one here,
Yep.
which is on an island where there used to be a massive oil-fired plant in Maine.
Yes, that's right.
And they've got it's a former warehouse on that island. It's got 8 blocks as big as cargo containers, housing a total of 1,300 individual lithium-ion batteries, each about the size of a desk computer.
There you
So
go.
these are big.
Yeah.
And in a related article, in this article, it's not the article, it's a link. They're talking about New England's largest battery is hidden inside a Massachusetts mountain. And that's the Northfield Pump Storage Plant right down the river.
Which is not really a chemical battery. It's a physical.
It is a battery.
It's a battery.
Not a chemical battery.
That's right.
But it's a flow battery.
And that battery was put in because a Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant was built, and the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant just had to put out that electricity whether anybody wanted it or not. So they put in the
So when nobody wanted it, they saved it.
Yeah, that's
Brilliant.
right. They just took the power when nobody wanted it, sold it back to the grid when somebody did want it. And that was a pumped storage facility in Northfield and Irving. It's right on the border between the two, and it's an interesting place to visit. And they even have
a nice park.
They have picnic tables there, and places that you can go snowshoeing and stuff like that, cross-country skiing,
well, like
hiking.
I said, it's a park.
Yep. You can't take a dip in their reservoir though.
They won't let you do that.
They won't let you do that. No, not safe for one thing. Okay, we are up to still on Tuesday, September 5th, Philly.com, and this is a story about the Bay of Fundy.
Can this giant turbine turn the tide for ocean energy?
The 52-foot diameter Cape Sharp tidal turbine endured the winter and spring on the seabed in the Bay of Fundy, generating electricity. Now it is in port for upgrades. While the 1,100-ton machine looks as though it went through a couple of rounds with a powerful adversary, it did survive, and that's an improvement over the earlier model's performance.
Well, we talked about it about a year ago.
Yeah.
When they first tried the earlier model. Which failed.
It was
blew up or something.
It was torn apart by the current.
But they made it out of fiberglass. Duh.
Duh.
This one is made out of steel.
Yeah. Well, it also weighs 1,100 tons. And you know, when I think about 1,100 tons, I know this is going to sound stupid. It isn't stupid, though. My father was in the Navy during the Second World War, and he served on what was the class? Fletcher class?
Destroyer.
Destroyers.
Yeah.
And a Fletcher class destroyer weighed a little over 2,000 tons.
Okay.
So you think about the size of a Fletcher class destroyer, which is probably not something that most people can envision, but I can envision it. Because, you know, we went to naval facilities when I was a kid. He was long since out of the Navy, but that machine that you're seeing in the picture there, or have seen in the picture, is about half the weight of a destroyer. And how many men served on a destroyer? You would know that, Tom, wouldn't you?
About 90.
About 90?
Yeah.
And they had 5 guns, which were 5-inch guns.
6.
6?
Well, 3 double mounts.
Oh, 3 double mounts, and that was the Fletcher.
I'm not sure. That might have been Sumner.
I think it was the Sumner. I think the Fletcher had 5 1-inch, one gun mounts.
It could have been, yeah. Fletcher was a little older class than the
Yeah, it was. My father was a fire control officer, but he was also an engineering officer and a navigator. And that combination is very unusual. He had 13 battle stars, which is the highest number of anybody in the Pacific.
Is that so?
That's right.
Yeah, wow.
And then he became a minister. Okay, we are up to we're up to Wednesday, September 6th, and we have a picture here.
I think if I had anything to say about this one. Well, it generates 2 megawatts.
Okay.
And if you haven't heard about the Bay of Fundy, they got among the highest tides in the world.
I think it is the highest tide in the world.
And it goes up and down 4 times a day.
Yep.
And 4 times a day this thing is working
to
make energy. And it's been in there since September, so it was in there from September to April.
Right.
They pulled it out. It's I won't say unscathed, but it's not damaged. And they're going to put it back in September along with another one.
Right. And, I mean, it's free electricity. What can you argue with? Okay, we are up to Wednesday, September 6th, and this item that we've got here is from Energy Live News.
Norwegian municipality pledges 100% climate neutrality. Looks like a neat little town,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
The Norwegian municipality of Arendal pledged to become 100% climate neutral. It is the world's first municipality to join the UN's Climate Neutral Now initiative, which means it will measure and reduce emissions, quote, to the greatest extent possible, end quote, and then offset other emissions. Municipal operations have been climate neutral since 2008. So what they're doing is they're making the entire thing climate neutral.
And they're very serious about it.
They're serious about it, yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah, good for them. Anything else on that one?
Not really. I mean, they're doing the obvious things. They're increasing the use of biofuels in electrical vehicles, buying renewable power, and increasing energy efficiency.
There you go.
Bingo.
Yeah.
There you go.
And people talk about what's wrong about buying renewable energy credits and things like that. But if you buy renewable energy credits, you're paying somebody else to produce them, which means you're fostering the use of renewable energy somewhere.
Yeah.
And what these people are going to do is they're going to do the final little bit of getting to 100% renewable by buying credit of some kind, offsetting.
So they're encouraging somebody else to invest in them.
Yep, but they have to get as much as they possibly can out of the local. And people should understand something here. Getting to 100% carbon neutral is not only not impossible, but you can go beyond it to a point where you are taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and sequestering it. We can do that.
Well, it's being done on a pilot plant basis right now.
It's being done in different. Well, anybody who plants a tree is doing something that's sequestering carbon.
That's along the same line.
We have ways of farming that sequester carbon, and Emily Payton says that you can sequester carbon by growing hemp.
Yep.
Okay. And I think she's right. And I think that there's a lot of use in that,
too. The numbers are there.
When I say, okay, I'm not making fun of her. Okay. So we're up to an item from Clean Technica.
This is a little bit more local.
Yeah.
James Hansen issues new Young People's Burden Report on climate change.
In a paper published in July, James Hansen said that because of continued inaction since the Paris Agreement was reached, limiting carbon emissions will no longer be sufficient. Now, he says, active measures to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere will be required, and those measures will impose...
Were we just talking about that?
Impose staggering expenses. I'm going to disagree with James Hansen here. I disagree with him every once in a while.
Well, by the way, who is Hansen? And I'll tell you who he is.
Yeah, go ahead.
The former NASA scientist.
Yes.
Who has been trying for years to make citizens of the world aware of the imminent danger produced or posed by climate change and global warming.
Many people who were aware for a long time of the problems of climate change became aware because of James Hansen. Now, I want to point out, this thing of climate change is not a recent Chinese plot. The first papers, the first papers predicting climate change appeared in the scientific journals in the 19th century, over 120, over 120 years ago. This has been around for a long time. This is when China was...
the 19th century is 1800 something.
Yeah, 1896.
Okay.
And the first time an American president was told, we have to do something about it, that was Lyndon Johnson, and it was just a little over 50 years ago. This is a long-standing problem, and Exxon, no question in my mind that they were hiding this for 40 years, and they knew about it, and so there is a plot going on. Plot, ladies and gentlemen, no question about it in my mind, there's a plot, but the plot is not the Chinese. It's some people who are producing fossil fuels, mostly in the United States, the UK, and Australia.
There's a little bit of a sub-message here in this. Hansen has instituted a suit on behalf
that's right.
of his children and the world's children.
His granddaughter is one of the plaintiffs in the suit.
Well, there's a video on this website, and you'll see him and his granddaughter talking about it.
Pretty girl. Pretty girl. And anyway, you can go to geoharvey.com, click on September 6th, and you'll find this article in a Clean Technica.
Well, there's a theory behind it. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Young people are guaranteed a non-toxic environment that is fit for human habitation as part of the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that the founding fathers baked into the Constitution.
Absolutely, and I think that's true.
That's what the basis of the suit is.
Yep, and by the way, the disagreement that I have with James Hansen on this is not that we have to go into removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but I disagree about the expense.
It's expensive right now.
Right now it's expensive, but you and I have been seeing things coming along. You know, this business of making acetic acid out of carbon dioxide from the air by using bacteria.
Yeah, this bionic leaf we just talked about.
Yeah, exactly. The bionic leaf. There are a lot of things that are going to become, and the bacteria are not GMOs. They're natural bacteria. Yeah. They do this by chelating heavy metals out of the water. I mean, you can get a win-win out of this, and you get enough of those guys working.
I mean, they're cleaning up water in the process.
They're cleaning up water, but they're also
second-order consequence.
Yeah, and they're taking the carbon dioxide, turning it into acetic acid. Well, the acetic acid can be used for making plastics or whatever you want to do. And so, you know, I'm thinking that it's not necessarily as expensive as...
Well, you've heard me say it on the show before.
Absolutely.
I'll say it again.
I know what you're going to say.
There's a lot of very smart people in this world thinking about stuff exactly like this.
Absolutely.
And some of them are going to hit the nail on the head.
Absolutely. And that having been said, our next item is from Interesting Engineering.
This is our last item.
It's our last item. We
New
have a little
reports
picture here.
show wind energy is getting cheaper than ever. And we got a picture.
We have a picture. Two recent reports indicate the cost of wind power will continue to decrease, making it one of the most affordable green alternatives on the market. The U.S. DOE's Wind Technologies Market Report and a report from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory both say wind technology and efficiency continues to improve. And you know, Tom, there's something bizarre about this. And that is, I keep coming across statements in the news saying wind power will be competitive by 2030 or 2040. And it's like, what are these people, where are these people living? I mean, we've got wind power selling for 2 cents per kilowatt hour. And then we've got batteries that sell their electricity for 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour. You put the two together and you've got electricity for 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, again, today in the news, Duke Energy has gone to the state of, I'm going to say it's South Carolina. I might be wrong about that.
Might be North Carolina.
Might be North Carolina. And said, by the way, we have a peaking plant using natural gas that we wanted to put online in 2022, but we're not going to do that until 2027, and maybe we're not going to do it ever.
That's interesting.
And the reason is because of the cost of renewable power. So, I think we're done.
Goodbye, folks.
Goodbye.
We'll grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.